What sound, bro?
All right, Shalom.
Shalom.
First and foremost, we would like to give all praise and glory unto
Yahweh,
Yahweh, by
Ba'ashem,
Hashem, Yahweh Shai,
Yahushua,
by
Ba'ashem,
Hashem,
Rakakadash.
Kakadash, and double honors unto the apostles and the elders of GMS who rule well, teach well, being great examples to his younger brothers, and peace and blessing salutations to the hopeful lake out there pushing his word and truth. And it's a series across the four winds in the name of Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, pushing to get up out of here. Shalom to the hopeful lake, the believers, the listeners who may have came back to the obedience of the scriptures through faith in Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai. All right, we're Brother GMS Mississippi Camp, and we're coming with another lesson. Going into slavery continues. All right, because as long as Esau, Edom is in power, okay, us as Israelites are going to be in slavery, man. Now the type of slavery changes, but it's still slavery at the end of the day. And ultimately, this devil, has the world, enslaved, to debt, which we're going to, get into it. All right. But we're always going to get the worst end of the deal, when you go into the scriptures, dealing with how this man, all right, would deal, and this is part of our punishment, man. The Lord, promised, that we will serve captivity, okay, because of our disobedience. So now we're serving, that punishment. All right.
Mhm.
So the type of slavery has changed, but it's still slavery, you know. So we're gonna get chattel slavery because when people think of slavery, this is the only type of slavery that they think about, But we're gonna show that this was a punishment from the Lord, okay, and only the Lord can reverse, this punishment. You got
Mhm.
it, bro.
Con. This is the definition chattel slavery on Google.
Yep.
It says a system where people are treated as the personal property of an other individual.
Yep. The personal property of another individual. You know.
Mhm.
Go ahead.
It says it can be bought, sold, or inherited.
Can be
This
bought, sold, or inherited. Okay, this is a punishment, man, to be in this position under the worst, all right, heathen that there is, Esau, Edom. To
Mhm.
be a possession of the devil. You gotta think about that, man. To be a possession of the goddamn devil, man.
Mhm.
Okay, showing that the Lord was pissed with us, man. Go ahead.
It says this system prominent in the United States and other colonial contexts reduced enslaved individuals to commodities, devour their legal rights and personal autonomy.
Yep,
Here,
personal autonomy. So that
yeah.
means you don't even belong to yourself. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
that means you don't even have personal autonomy. You don't even have authority over you. Okay. And that's what, chattel slavery goes into. That's why in slavery, Jake will be sold, separated from their families because you don't have, that's why Elias Wamba said, like, in this setup, you really don't have, you know, marriage and family because you're a slave. Like, this ain't what the Lord intended when it comes to marriage and comes to family and inheritance. You can't have that in slavery. Okay, you might have a cool situation or whatever, but you really can't embrace that here in slavery, man.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you got it, bro.
It says here's some detail. Here's a detailed explanation. Chattel slavery is a specific form of slavery where enslaved people are considered chattel, meaning personal property, similar to livestock, other possessions. This status allows others to treat them as commodities with the ability to buy, sell, or trade them.
Yeah, so that's all we were, as we was shipped off. When you go to the transatlantic slave trade, even the sub-Saharan slave trade dealing with Ishmael. Ishmael did us bad too. Okay, but the prime, the main enemy was Esau Edom.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and even to this day, there's an element of chattel slavery that exists. Okay, because as you work, especially even amongst these sports, they trade these niggas, at
Mm-hmm.
will. They trade these niggas off. Guess what? If the owner of the Lakers die, All right, guess what? Their children inherit what those players. Okay, so there's still a level of chattel slavery, but now there's a element of wage slavery that's added to it. Okay, or it transitioned to wage slavery. Still with an element of chattel slavery. Okay, because now it's more a thing of debt. But let's get in prophecy to show that the Lord will put us. It's the Lord that put us in this chattel slavery under the devil. Okay, and under the lease it segue to a wage slavery. Get that, yeah, Deuteronomy. Yep.
This Deuteronomy 28:16, it says, "And the Lord Yahweh shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships
Yep.
by the way wherefore I spake unto thee."
Yeah, said Egypt again, in which if you in the spirit, he that have eyes to see, ears to hear, we know that Egypt is speaking of America. Okay, spiritual Egypt. Revelation 11 chapter. It goes into what spiritual Egypt and Sodom. Okay, letting you know that there will be a future Egypt. We will serve captivity and not the physical Egypt, but the spiritual Egypt, which is this is here right here in America. Go ahead.
It says there. It says though thou shalt see it no more again.
Yep.
And there ye shall be sold unto your enemies as bondsmen and bondwomen, and
Yeah. No, you got it.
And no man shall buy you.
Yeah, so it says no man shall buy, which is redeemed, which no one will redeem us out of their situation. Okay, because we were bought, we were sold, so you can't say no. People bought you. No, it says redeemed, which is to buy us out of this situation, because we're still here. We're still subjugated. All right, under the government of Esau Edom. As long as we're subjugated to this government, this is a captivity, man. Okay, the scriptures tell you that we're subject to payments to this day. All right, let's get Jeremiah 17:4, and then let's get that word serve. Showing you that this punishment is directly from Yahweh Bashim Al Shai. Okay, and the deliverance gonna be from Yahweh Bashim Al Shai. Go ahead.
This is Jeremiah chapter 17, verse 4.
Yep.
It says, "And thou, even thyself, shall discontinue from thy inheritance which I gave thee.
Yep.
And I will cause thee to serve thy enemies in the land which thou knowest not."
Yeah, to serve thy enemies in the land which thou knowest not. Go ahead.
"For ye have kindled a fire in mine anger, which shall burn forever."
You have kindled a fire in my anger, which shall burn forever. All right, which is for a long period of time, long duration of time. Because it seems like we've been in this predicament, man, just for ages. That's why our people, a lot of our people, they don't see a history beyond slavery. Their origin, their genesis is in a cotton field, tobacco field somewhere. Okay, we've been in this position, in the flesh, in the mortal time, a long time. Okay, but it was for a long duration because of our disobedience. Now let's go to this word serve and see, but we're going to be delivered by obedience. Okay, and faith. You see, go ahead. Yep. So we're gonna get this word serve. See, those thing about the Bible, niggas, the Bible is the most challenged book in the earth. Well, nigga, you subjugated to it. Nigga, you're in slavery today. Nigga, we in slavery together.
No matter where you move to.
Yeah. So no matter what type of status you got, okay, no matter what type of money you got, all right, no matter what type of businesses you got, guess what? You still subjugated to another government. All right. So that means that this government can do you how they want to. And look, that's why they do niggas like they do. Your Bill Cosby's, your R. Kelly's, okay, and so forth and so on. Mayweather, all right, this nigga still in child support court, billionaire in child support court. Showing you that you're still subjugated to another government. Nigga, you a slave. No matter what you get, what you got, what you own, what power you think you got. No, nigga, you a slave. So you subjugated. You a billionaire was summoned to a court hearing about child support. Okay, go ahead.
This is that word serve in the blue letter.
Strong's H5647. Avad.
Which is abide in the Hebrew, That's where you get the word Obadiah. You know, I think it's Abaya in the Hebrew, servant of Yahweh. All right, you got it, bro.
It says to work, serve, to labor, work, to work for another, serve another by labor,
Mm-hmm.
serve as subjects. It says to be work, to be tilled of land, to make oneself a servant. It says to be work, to compel to labor or work, cause to labor, cause to serve as subjects, to be led or enticed to serve.
And so, at the end of the day, this is a prophecy that you can't get around because every Israelite is subjugated to this. Okay, even if you got your own business, okay, who you got to get your certificate from to do business, who you still have to pay taxes to.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, then you do business, you got your own business, you're in a different tax bracket. Okay, you got different fees that you got to pay.
Subject to the
Okay,
paperwork.
yeah, you subject to that paperwork, you subject to being, qualified according to his standard. Okay, and your business got to be approved by him. You can't just have a holistic business. You can't just come up and challenge certain industries that he got in place. You can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you're still limited in what you can do. Okay, don't confuse slave privileges with freedom. Okay, that's what a lot of people do because you got certain slave privileges. Well, that was a deception of the elites. Okay, to put people what in wage slavery for the sake of capitalism. Because during the industrial period, you go back, the industrial boom started in Europe. All right, mainly in England. Okay, that's why you have Birmingham, in England. And then you have the Birmingham over here in Alabama. Well, Birmingham was known for its steel production, just like Birmingham. All right, Alabama is known for steel production. Well, the industrial boom started in Europe, and the elites brought their model to America, and that's why they went to war because the elites wanted, all right, the slaves to go from being chattel slaves to corporate slaves, which is wage slaves.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we was put in a punishment, okay, by our power and chattel slavery. All right, and the elites, what did they do? They changed it from chattel slavery to wage slavery. So we're still, all right, in slavery, man. Slavery continues, man. This is why we need a savior, man. You got it, bro.
I was watching it when I was telling you about it. Listen, this guy he said made him really think about it is when you have a slave, you got to make sure they eat. You got to make sure they got somewhere to sleep. You got to make sure they get sick. You got to pay for all these things, all the expenses. Well, the whole concept went from the elites. Well, hey, when they so-called abolished slavery, because none of that was for our good.
Mm-hmm.
When they did that, okay, now the slave owners, previous slave owners, they're like, okay, cool. I still got that land, I'll pay you, but guess what? Now you gotta pay for it. The house you stay in, you gotta pay me for that.
Mm-hmm.
The food you eat, you gotta pay me for that. You gotta pay for all these things. This Jake said he get paid, and 30 minutes later, all his check gone to bills.
Mm-hmm.
That's wage slavery.
Mm-hmm. And you subjugated to that wage. You subjugated to that labor because you need that wage to live, which is going to go into. You can get that definition for wage.
Con.
You know.
This is wage slavery. It says wage slavery is a term to describe the situation where a person's livelihood depends entirely on wages or a salary, particularly when those wages are low, working conditions are poor, and opportunities of advancement are limited.
Yeah, so you have all these different jobs in America. Because there's a difference between the job and the career. But even in the career, you're still a wage slave because everything you have is based on your salary or your wage.
Mhm.
You know, everything that you have, the way that the way that your life function is powered by your wage or your salary. So you're subjugated to the labor, that you have to do to get that wage or that salary.
Mhm.
Okay. So as people have been addicted to these convenient lifestyles, where they become trapped, okay, imprisoned by this labor to keep these lifestyles going,
Mhm.
you know, and then the elites know this. You see? So now it's a wage slavery to where, you're making, these men that you've never seen before filthy rich. Okay. And they give you just enough, to pay a few bills, because that's why now people need two jobs and a side hustle. So they
Mm-hmm.
give you enough to pay a portion of your bills, something to eat, you know, and be able to get back, to that labor, because you need that wage to survive. So now you see people surviving off these wages, because you really, and you gotta understand, when going back to that autonomy, you see, people lost their autonomy when they began to depend on the grid. The more people became dependent on the grid, the more people became the more people became slaves to wages.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you grew all your own food, okay, if you had your own thing going where some people raise cows and slaughter them and whatever. There's so many ways to get money, okay, or make a living, not on this man's time clock. But see,
Mm-hmm.
people were removed from the wisdom of the earth, from the wisdom of, agriculture. Okay, only 2% of American population are farmers. Okay, so as Esau removed people from the knowledge of agriculture and self sustainability, okay, it created a society that was what? Wage dependent.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's why it's so devastating when people get fired. People have breakdowns, they cry, don't know what to do, because you being fired is associated with you losing everything.
Mm-hmm. The lifestyle.
Yeah, the life. You
Mm-hmm.
can't pay nothing, you know? Like, you can't live. You getting evicted, car going back, daycare, you can't, people lose everything. They lose these jobs because their whole being is attached to this wage or to this salary, man.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a form of slavery. All right, that's capitalistic slavery, man. Okay, this is where the few capitalize off the labor of many. It's a sum up capitalism. That's what that is.
Mm-hmm.
Where you have a few, all right, small percentage of people benefit off the labor of many. Okay, and who's at the low end jobs of this capitalist society is Jake. You got that the subject. You can say something, bro?
No, you good, bro. I was gonna read the rest of that.
Oh, you got some more? Okay, read
Yeah,
it. Yeah,
it
yeah.
said it's often used by critics of wage-based employment to highlight the perceived exploitation of labor and social stratification within capitalist systems.
Yep. So let's get that in Proverbs
17, what is it?
22:7
22?
or 22:7.
Uh,
You probably just type it again. Type in lender, should pop up. And then put in lender. And this is how the elites, run the earth. Not only do they
mhm.
enslave individuals, they enslave, nations. You got it, bro.
Proverbs chapter 22, verse 7, it says the rich ruleth over the poor, and the borrower is a servant of the lender.
Yeah, so the rich ruleth over the poor, and the borrower is servant to the lender. Okay? So you look at the American dollar, this whole system, it was set up to put nations in debt.
Mm-hmm.
So if your government is in debt to the elite bankers, well, guess what? You're in debt to the elite bankers because your governments have sold you out to the elite bankers. Your governments take on these loans where certain peoples of the government get rich. Okay, but what do? They take these loans, all right, and guess who's the collateral? The people.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's why you're so heavily taxed in this society. Okay, because their tax goes into the debt. Okay, that they've accumulated from the bankers, man.
Mm-hmm.
This is why America is nothing but a slave shop when it comes to to wage. Like I said, that's why you have people working all these jobs. okay?
Mhm.
Trying, the gig economy, all these different things, okay, has people chasing these wages and these salaries, okay, to maintain a lifestyle, all right? And all you're doing, because what do? You live your whole life, you know, uh, paying bills, and then you pass that same, okay, mindset to your children,
Mhm.
okay? Because the system is working so good for the elites that people now train their children up to be debt slaves.
Mhm.
Go to college. You're telling your children go get in debt. You
Yep.
train your children to go to college. You train them to go get in debt. I seen something the other day. The brother can attest. Like we seen a guy. He working for himself. Digging. Pipelines. All right, and guess what? He had a little, 15-year-old guy with him. Working. The excavator, digging holes, and putting valves on. See, that's really how it's supposed to be.
Mhm.
Even as Israelite men, even if your father wasn't well off, you can go get under another Israelite man that was well off and learn his trade, learn business, learn whatever, and get put on. Okay?
Mhm.
Everything about this society is to keep you in debt when really we come from a culture where we put each other on. Okay? So this man, has switched the game from chattel slavery to slavery, okay? But it's still slavery. You just have the illusion of freedom. You have the
Mhm.
illusion of choice. You have the illusion of this, okay? Cause this I remember Jake. He used to you always had them rebellious niggas at work that know every
Mhm.
goddamn thing, and you know and they told him, she said, you need this job, and Jake said, nigga, I don't need this job. He said, I need a job, but I don't need this job. you know? But that shows you that look, you just have an illusion. Like nigga, that shows you that what? Yeah, he right. You don't need this job, but nigga, you
You
need
need
a
a
job.
job.
So at the end of the day, nigga, you need somebody's job.
Shit, you got shit. What you gonna pay? And they were just saying, bro. Sly, go ahead.
No, you got
And what you was saying too about the other brother, he was saying the same thing. Like the bills, that's that modern day whip.
yeah,
Esau took the physical whoop off our ass and put them bills on our ass.
yeah.
Like them bills, I know anybody can attest to it, but it seems like it take a long time to get paid.
Yeah.
But them bills, it seems like they Esau got this shit set up where you ain't got too much. The only wiggle room you can get is if the Lord give you a little extra.
A motherfucker steady them bills, steady spinning the block. Spin again.
So them bitches spend twice as much. You be like, hold on, I just paid this motherfucker.
Let's get that and we can end. Let's get that 'cause see, this is why Yahweh Shai, what he did, because this is what's gonna what Yahweh Shai did was to get us to get out of this situation. That's why I said, for the joy set before him, he endured the cross. Matter of fact, let's get at Hebrews 12 and 2. Now we can segue to Yahweh Shai and why Yahweh Shai, okay, is so prevalent.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
It's Hebrews chapter 12, verse 2. It says, looking unto Yahweh Shai, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despised. Go ahead.
Now, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross. Okay? And that joy, part of that joy was him to be able to get us out of captivity, man. His elect, okay? And putting us in rulership, that's part of that joy. So he suffered, because he knew, that would give him, the green light from the Father to be able to get us out of captivity in these times, man. Go ahead.
Mm-hmm. It says, despising the shame, and is set down at the right hand of the Most High.
And sat down at the right hand of the Most High, a place of honor. Until the time that he sent back, to remove, okay, his people from captivity, man, and to enslave the captors, man, which is Esau, Edom, along with the rest of these heathens.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we're slaves, all right, needing a savior, man. Okay, and that savior is Yahweh Shai. All right. And the book of Isaiah goes into get Isaiah 14:1. It goes into the position that Yahweh Shah is getting ready to put us in. You got it, bro.
This is Isaiah chapter 14, verse 1. It says, "For the Lord Yahweh will have mercy on Jacob, and will yet choose Israel, and set them in their own land, and strangers shall be joined with them, and they shall cleave unto the house of Jacob."
Yeah, so you will yet choose Israel and set them in their own land, sovereignty. Okay? Yahweh Shah is coming he's bringing back sovereignty for his people, man. No more having to answer to another government ever again. Okay? That's going to be done with forever. Every government will answer to us. Okay? Go ahead.
God. It says, "And the people shall take them and bring them to their place, and the house of Israel shall possess them in the land of the Lord Yahweh. For servants and handmaids they shall take them captive, whose captives they were, and they shall." Go ahead.
Yeah, so taking them and speaking of these heathens, taking them to their place, which is a place of servitude. Okay? We even subjugate the servitude. Now the Lord's going to flip it to where there's, service unto us. Okay, go ahead.
It says, "And they shall rule over their oppressors."
And they shall rule over their oppressors, man. Go ahead, read the next verse 3.
Verse 3, it says, "It shall come to pass in the day of the Lord Yahweh shall give thee rest from thy sorrow and from thy fear and from the hard bondage where thou from the hard bondage wherein thou was made to serve."
Yeah, and that's what Yahweh Shah is bringing, to his people. This been a hard bondage, man. And in this time, the devil, he's so in tune with wickedness, man, where he's just destroying people, psychologically, mentally, spiritually, through the foods, everything is a war, everything is poison, in this society, man. So this devil, the scripture say is wearing out the saints, but the Lord is coming and give us that forever rest, man.
Good.
So that was a point. You just want to touch on that real quick. Something, me and the brother speaking on earlier. So Lord will you brothers. All right, and you sisters edified. Till next time we say shalom.
Shalom.
Kwam Yashala.
Come Shalom.
Abba.
Shalom.
Shalom.
Shalom.